Hi folks, welcome to my channel. I hope you've all had a great week. In today's Paint With Me video, I'm excited to be doing the first painting in this new watercolour painting kit that I bought on Etsy and unboxed in my latest art haul video. I'll put a link in the card above if you want to go and check that out. So I first saw Rin from Drawing with Waffles use this kit on her channel a while back, and not only did it look a lot of fun, but I thought it looked like a great way to learn more about watercolour, and I'll give you more information and details as we go through the video. But let's get the supplies out of the box and see what's included. So first out is this watercolour dot card and mixing palette combined with 12 watercolour paint dots on it, which I'll swatch out later. Next out is the main item in the kit, which is the A5 Watercolour Trip to Italy painting book, which looks and feels really beautiful. But before I dive into it, let's check out the other supplies in the box. There is also a plastic container with more watercolour dots in it, the same colours as before, I suppose in case you run out. And each one of these colours has an individual lid so they shouldn't mix or dry out. There's also a small pot of Renaissance masking fluid, and as much as I've tried a few masking fluids out, I've not tried this one before. Next are what I thought were just sample watercolour swatch cards, but it turns out they are actually blank watercolour bookmarks, but I'll put them to one side for now. Now we have two paintbrushes which are both round, one size 6 and one size 1 by Artmaster, which again is not a brand I'm familiar with, so it'll be good to test those out. Last in the box, as well as some shredded paper, is some artist wax, which is going to be fun to try out. Right, let's open up this painting book. In the front there is information on the authors, one of whom is ranked among the top 20 watercolour artists in the world. And on the following page is a glossary of some watercolour terms and techniques with an area for you to test them out on the right hand side. If you're a beginner to watercolour, here you'll learn what a flat wash is, what the wet in wet technique is, you'll learn about lifting, blurring, gradated washes, and you'll also get to test out the masking fluid and the wax. At the bottom of the page there is also a little key to indicate how much water you need to add, which I'm guessing will be part of the step-by-step instructions for each painting. So as much as I'm familiar with most of the techniques mentioned on this page, I'm still going to quickly fill out this test area to get a feel for the brush, the watercolour paper and the watercolours themselves. The brushes in this kit, by the way, are synthetic but quite different to my regular brushes, as they seem to hold a lot more water and are softer than I'm used to. But the paper seemed nice, and I've since found out that it's the Fabriano cold pressed paper, which also comes from Italy, so it's all about Italy in this box. The watercolour paints are not from Italy but are professional quality watercolours from Van Gogh Royal Talons, which is another supply I've not tried before, but they do seem to activate really quickly with water and lay down well on the paper. On my test area here I did try and use all of the colours, but I think I'll swatch them out together before I get started. Now, as much as I said I've tried most of the techniques on this practice sheet, I haven't used the artist wax before. Well, not since I was at school anyway, but this can be used in several ways to add some cool textures and effects when painting roofs, grass and walls, depending on how you apply it. But basically it just preserves the area where you apply it, as it resists paint and water. The masking fluid in this pack does seem to apply nicely and be removed easily as well, so I'm looking forward to using that. To swatch out these 12 watercolour paints, I used one of the bookmarks that came in the box, as at least it was the same paper as in the book and would give me an accurate impression of how each of the watercolours showed up and behaved on the paper before I started. There are 12 colours in this kit, starting with violet, lemon yellow, raw umber, burnt umber, olive green, viridian, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium red, madolate deep, ultramarine and indigo. One of the things I like about this kit is that the colour palette has already been picked out for you by a professional artist, and I'm looking forward to seeing how each of these colours is going to be used. Right, so finally let's get started on today's painting. The subject piece of this first lesson is a window from Riva del Garda, and you can see the reference picture for this painting on the right hand side nearest the ring binder, along with step-by-step instructions on how to paint it. On the left hand side are two outline sketches of the reference picture, so you get two attempts at the same piece, and they can be easily removed if you want to frame them or gift them to somebody. So I'm going to start by painting the window frame nearest the ring binder, and have put some washi tape down the centre of the page to keep a nice clean edge between the two sketches. So step 1 says to wash all the wall in yellow ochre, so I'm using the larger of the two brushes to apply this. As well as step-by-step instructions with information on which paints to use or mix, there are also pictures to guide you, which can help you see how the painting develops. This I think is really helpful, and is why this painting kit can be used by anyone at any skill level. The next thing to do is to paint a wash on the window frame, and here we're told to mix cadmium red and burnt umber. It doesn't say in what proportion, so this bit is largely left up to the artist. I think I added a bit too much cadmium red here, as the reference painting looks slightly different, but it might dry slightly lighter, so I'll have to wait and see. Next we have to wash the flower pot leaves with a mixture of olive green and burnt umber. This colour wasn't nearly as dark as the reference picture though, and I did wonder if it might have been a misprint, and maybe they meant viridian and burnt umber instead, but I'm not about to challenge the masters of the watercolours. I may change it in the next window though. It does say in this step to leave some white of the paper free for the flowers. Now that's dry, it's time for step 2, which is to wash the windows with YG and YO. So that's yellow ochre, and they must have meant indigo, as there's no YG on my colour chart. And we have to leave a place for the flowers at the bottom. So I'm going to use up some of the yellow ochre I've already got on my palette and mix in the indigo. Next it says to wash the stone frame around the window with raw umber and lots of water. I think I didn't use enough water on this bit, so I'm going to try and spread some of the colour over and maybe try and lift some of it up so it's not too dark. Now we have to wash the flower pot with less water using a mixture of cadmium red and burnt umber. And I think I should have made use of the smaller brush at this point, but I was concentrating so hard on the instructions I kind of forgot about it. Okay, so now we have to wash the stains on the wall with an average amount of water. I'm not sure what an average amount of water is, but by mixing together burnt umber and raw umber. I think it's going to take a bit of practice to figure out what amounts of water are meant by less, average and more. Once I'd done this, I used the blur technique to soften the edges of these marks just by adding some clean water, as I thought the edges were a bit too harsh. Right, with this done, the next step was to add some stains to the stone frame using raw umber and burnt umber, and this colour did not match the guide painting at all, and I couldn't help thinking I needed to add violet to the burnt umber instead of raw umber, but I wanted to follow the instructions as closely as I could, so I kept with it. Right, we're now on to step 3, and here it says to wash shadows from the flower and stone frame using a mix of ultramarine, yellow ochre and raw umber with an average amount of water again. It was interesting that there were 3 colours to mix for this shadow, and I wouldn't have thought to add the yellow ochre if I was mixing it myself, but I guess that helps it to all come together and look cohesive. Okay, the next part of this step said to add shadows on the frame with burnt umber and violet with less water, but for some reason I missed this part out and went on to add the canopy shadow on the stone frame using ultramarine and more yellow ochre. And again, this colour didn't look dark enough, so I think I should have added more ultramarine. Right, the next instruction said to wash the core shadows on the flower pot with a 3-colour mix of burnt umber, yellow ochre again and the Madder Lake Deep. And again, I don't think I went dark enough. There's a bit of a theme developing here, and I think, to be honest, I struggled to follow the instructions a bit at this point just because I wasn't always entirely sure which bit they were meaning to paint, and I did get just a little bit confused. But once I got back on track, it was time to darken up the shadows on the windows. This was a mixture of indigo and viridian, and finally I went dark enough, but this came out a bit too green, but I did like the contrast it gave with the lighter colours. At this point I also started to look back at the reference photograph as well as the reference painting. It's interesting to see how the photograph has been interpreted by the artist, and I think for the next painting I need to be a bit more aware of not just the step-by-step instructions, but looking more frequently at the photograph to see why and how the artists have used the colours and techniques described. In this way I can start to understand and learn rather than just following along. When comparing my picture to the reference photo, all I could see were areas that needed to be a lot darker, like the shadow cast by the flower pot, the windows in general, and the area under the top of the stone frame. However, these are all things that I can try and improve upon in my next attempt. So next was to add in a darker green to the leaves using indigo and olive green, and once that had dried, I could add in the final step. It was at this point though that I realised I'd missed adding a wash to the window frame itself, so quickly whilst my flower pot was drying I went in to try and add in those darker washes and shadows. So finally, it was time to put in the red flowers with cadmium red and yellow ochre. I think adding in the red flowers really pulled this painting together, and by simply doing this first lesson I feel that I've already learned quite a lot about colour choices and mixing, which go a long way to help produce a harmonious feeling piece. But as much as it was a lot of fun, there's still much room for improvement. Right, here we go with the second attempt at this painting. I am now going to be a master of watercolour. No, seriously though, I am going to put this video into time-lapse, but if you want you can change the speed of this video in the YouTube settings. So looking at it dry, the first attempt was okay, but a bit of a test run trying out new brushes, paper, paints and following instructions that were a bit confusing for my small brain. Second time round though, I felt a bit more confident with what I was doing and had a few things I wanted to do differently. First of all, I wanted to make use of both of the brushes instead of just the 6 one, and more importantly, I wanted to be bolder with my values. I also wanted to try and not only follow the printed step-by-step instructions, but also look at both the photo reference and the painting reference together to try and see what the master artist saw. I'm not used to drawing more scenic pictures like this, but I have to say I have really enjoyed it today, and I did mention that trying out landscapes and so on was something I wanted to try out in my plans for 2019 video. And I do really like the whole idea behind this painting kit. It's like a series of tutorials in a box with everything you need right there, and you can even contact the artist if you have a question using the special QR code on each page. You can also ask the author advice and send your painting to his email, so how cool is that? This art book contains 17 step-by-step lessons with beautiful Italian landscapes which can enable you to learn professional watercolour techniques quickly and easily. Personally, I am really excited at the thought of learning new techniques, and hopefully by the end of this book, this learning will show up in my own paintings. So far as today's 2 attempts went, I think there are good and bad bits of both of the paintings. I like the bolder detail on the wall of the first one, but I prefer the inside of the window and the flower pot on the second one. It's tempting to go in and fix the bits I'm not happy with by adding further layers, but I'm going to leave them as they are now so I can look back and remind myself of what I want to change next time, and by the end it will be easier to see any progress I've made. Also, I found sometimes that if I go in and add too many layers, a piece can end up looking overworked and dull. I'd love to know which painting you prefer and why, so please feel free to drop me a comment in the box below, and don't forget as well that if you like this video to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel where I post twice weekly videos on all things art related. I had a lot of fun today and I'm really looking forward to the next one. Thank you all so much for your support, have a great weekend and I'll see you very soon. Take care, bye.